My father didn't die the way the hospital report said he did. The report said cardiac event, sudden onset. No, prior indicators. The kind of language doctors use when they want to close a file without opening a conversation. My father was 61. Ran 3 miles every Tuesday and Thursday. Ate oatmeal for breakfast because my mother had been nagging him about cholesterol since 2009. People like that don't just collapse in a parking garage on a Wednesday afternoon. But that's what the report said. So that's what everyone believed. Everyone except me. I found out through a voicemail. Not from the hospital. Not from my mother. Not from my older brother Derek. From my father's business partner, a quiet man named Raymond Shu, who had known my father for 19 years and apparently trusted me more than anyone else in the room when it counted. Claire. His voice was low. Careful. Like someone speaking in a house where the walls had ears. I know this is the worst possible time. But before you sign anything, before you let anyone hand you paperwork, call me. Please. Your father left something at the office that I think was meant for you. I listened to that message 4 times standing in the hospital parking lot while my mother cried inside and my brother Derek handled everything the way Derek always handled everything, loudly. Efficiently. And entirely in his own interest. I didn't call Raymond back right away. I went inside first. I sat with my mother while she filled out forms with shaking hands. I watched my brother pace the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear like a man managing a crisis. Not grieving a father? His wife? Sandra. Kept bringing my mother cups of coffee nobody asked for, and patting her shoulder with the kind of practiced warmth that looks right from a distance. I'd known Sandra for 6 years. I'd never once seen her do anything without a reason attached to it. I didn't say anything. I just watched. The drive to Raymond's office the next morning was 40 minutes. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. My brother had texted me twice asking about the estate attorney's contact information and once asking when I'd be available to go through Dad's things together. I didn't reply to any of them. I learned a long time ago that Derek's version of doing things together meant Derek doing things while I stood nearby, confirming his decisions. Raymond met me at the door himself. He was a small man, precise in the way accountants tend to be, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a look on his face that I recognized from the one time my father had explained to me what it felt like to know something you couldn't prove yet. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I almost didn't, I said honestly. He led me past the front desk, past the row of offices with glass walls, to a back room I'd been in maybe twice before. A storage room converted into something between a kitchenette and a filing area. He closed the door behind us, checked the hallway through the small window, and turned back to me. How much do you know about the business accounts? He asked. I was an ER nurse. I knew how to triage, how to stay calm when everything around me was collapsing, and how to read a situation for what it actually was, rather than what people wanted it to look like. What I did not know was anything about the financial architecture of my father's small commercial real estate firm. Almost nothing, I said. Raymond nodded like that was the answer he expected. He pulled a manila folder from a drawer, set it on the table between us, but didn't open it yet. Your father came to me 8 weeks ago, he said. He told me he'd noticed irregularities. Money moving between accounts in patterns that didn't match any project cycle. Vendor payments going to addresses he didn't recognize. He said he'd confronted Derek about one of the transactions, and Derek had an explanation. But the explanation didn't hold when your father checked the records himself. I kept my breathing steady. How much money? Raymond opened the folder. The top sheet was a summary. Numbers highlighted in yellow. Dates in the margin. Over 14 months. Approximately $230,000. The number landed without drama. I didn't gasp. I just looked at it. He didn't go to the police, I said. It wasn't a question. He wanted to handle it quietly. He said he needed more time to document everything before he accused his own son. Raymond paused. He was also worried about your mother. He didn't want her to know until he was certain. I looked at the summary sheet for a long moment. And then he had a cardiac event. Raymond's jaw tightened. Claire. Your father had a full physical 11 weeks ago. His cardiologist told him he had the heart of a man 15 years younger. No blockages. No arrhythmia. Nothing flagged. He showed me the report himself. The room got quieter. Not in a peaceful way. In the way rooms get when something you already suspected becomes something you can't unknow. He left this for you, Raymond said, sliding the folder toward me. He came in 3 weeks before he died, and told me if anything ever happened to him, I should give this to you, and only you. Not your mother. Not Derek. You. Inside the folder were printed account statements. A handwritten timeline in my father's neat block lettering. A USB drive in a small plastic sleeve. And a single note card. I picked up the note card last. Claire? If you're reading this, I wasn't careful enough. Look at the vendor accounts. Look at the dates. Don't let them rush you. His handwriting was so familiar it felt like being punched in the chest. I took the folder. I thanked Raymond in a voice that came out steadier than I felt. I drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away. Sat in the corner with my back to the wall out of habit. And opened the folder properly. The vendor accounts were a pattern once you knew what to look for. 7 different company names. None of them appeared in any public business directory. All of them had been added to the firm's approved vendor list within the past 18 months. The payments ranged from $4,000 to $22,000. Always under the threshold that would trigger an automatic audit flag. Always on Fridays, when my father typically worked from home. Derek had signature authority over vendor approvals. My father had granted it 2 years ago when the firm expanded, and he needed someone to handle operational logistics while he focused on client relationships. He trusted his oldest son with the keys to the building. And Derek had made copies without telling him. My phone buzzed. Derek. Still waiting to hear back. Mom needs us both focused right now. Call me. I put the phone face down. The USB drive contained scanned documents. A folder titled Simply D, with subfolders organized by month. My father had been building a case. Methodically. Quietly. The way he did everything. Lease agreements with forged signatures on the vendor contracts. A photo he'd taken of Derek's car parked outside one of the vendor addresses on a Saturday morning when that address was supposed to be a commercial supply warehouse. Bank routing information that traced 2 of the vendor accounts back to a holding company registered in Sandra's maiden name, Sandra. Of course, I thought about the way she'd patted my mother's shoulder in the hospital hallway. The practiced warmth. The coffee nobody asked for. The way she'd leaned toward Derek during every family dinner in the past year and a half. Whispering things too quiet to catch. Steering conversations away from anything involving the business. My father hadn't been stealing from him. Derek had been stealing from my father. And Sandra had built the infrastructure to make it untraceable. I closed the laptop. Sat back. And let myself breathe for exactly 1 minute. Then I picked up my phone and called the number Raymond had included on a sticky note inside the folder. A detective named Angela Marsh. White Collar Crimes Division. Who Raymond said my father had been in contact with 3 weeks before his death but had not yet formally filed a report. She answered on the second ring. Ms. Claire Hadley, she said. Which told me she'd been expecting the call. Yes. I said. I think my father was trying to report financial crimes before he died. And I think I need to tell you that I'm not entirely sure his death was an accident. There was a pause that felt like a decision being made. Then she said, Where are you right now? I told her. She told me not to go home. Not to speak to any family members. And to stay exactly where I was. She was there in 22 minutes. Detective Marsh was in her mid-40s. And direct in the way that competent women tend to be when they've spent years proving their competence in rooms that didn't want them there. She sat across from me, ordered nothing, and went through the folder with the focused attention of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of evidence. Your father contacted us on a Tuesday, she said, without looking up from the statements. He said he was close to completing his documentation and wanted to set a formal meeting for the following week. He never made it to that meeting. I kept my hands flat on the table. The cardiac event. His hospital records indicate no prior cardiovascular history. She looked up, which means either it was a genuinely rare spontaneous event or something contributed to it. I told her about the note card. I told her about Sandra's name on the holding company. I told her about the photo of Derek's car outside the vendor address. I told her everything Raymond had told me. Every detail from the folder. Every observation I'd been cataloging in my own mind since I'd stood in that hospital hallway watching my brother manage a crisis instead of grieve a father. Marsh listened without interrupting. When I finished, she closed the folder and looked at me with the particular steadiness of someone who has heard bad things before and learned how to hold them. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to answer honestly, even if the answer is complicated. Go ahead. Are you willing to participate in a controlled process? Meaning, are you willing to engage your brother and his wife in a way that gives us the opportunity to observe their behavior and collect corroborating evidence? I looked at her. You want them to think I don't know anything yet. I want them to act naturally, she said. People under pressure reveal themselves, especially when they believe they still have control over the narrative. I thought about Derek's texts. Still waiting to hear back. Mom needs us both focused right now. He wasn't grieving. He was managing. He was trying to consolidate the story before anyone started asking the wrong questions. Yes, I said. Tell me what you need me to do. What she needed me to do was go home. Answer Derek's messages. Be present at the family house that evening. Be cooperative. Be soft. To be the version of me that Derek expected, the younger sister. The one who deferred. The nurse who understood medical things but left the business decisions to the men in the room. It was a version of me I'd spent years dismantling. Turns out it was still useful. Marsh gave me a device. Small. Matte black. Clipped to the inside of my jacket lapel. She showed me the range. She told me she would have 2 plainclothes officers within proximity of the house. She gave me a number to text if anything escalated. Don't go anywhere alone with them, she said. Kitchen is fine. Living room is fine. Anywhere isolated. You find a reason to stay public. I nodded. I'd given patients worse instructions and expected them to follow through. My mother's house smelled like flowers and casseroles when I walked in that evening. The kind of smell that accumulates when a neighborhood decides to collectively express sympathy through food. Derek was in the kitchen. Jacket off. Looking very much like a man who had appointed himself head of household. Sandra sat at the table with a legal pad, writing something in her careful script. She looked up when I walked in. Her smile arrived exactly on schedule. Claire. We were starting to worry. Where have you been all day? Running errands, I said. Mom needed a few things. Derek came around the counter and hugged me in a way that felt like an arm going around my shoulder to check what was in my pockets. Good. Good. We need everyone here. There's a lot to handle. There always is, I said, and kept my voice warm. We sat at the dinner table. The 3 of us. My mother had gone to lie down. Derek laid out a sequence of things that needed to happen: the estate, the business, the accounts, the transition of management. He used words like logical and straightforward and what Dad would have wanted in rotation. The way people do when they want to make a decision that benefits them sound like an obligation they're reluctantly accepting. Then Sandra slid the legal pad across the table to me. We need you to sign off on a few things, she said. Just procedural. Transferring operational authority during the estate process. I looked at the document. It was not procedural. It was a transfer of my father's remaining ownership interest in the firm to Derek, to be executed immediately pending estate settlement. It was also, notably, the kind of document that would make the vendor account irregularities. My father had been documenting significantly harder to trace back to anyone currently at the table. I picked it up. I read it slowly, which I think surprised them, because Sandra's fingers moved to her pen in a way that looked automatic, like she was ready to point to the signature line on cue. Where did this come from? I asked. Estate attorney drafted it. Direct set. Standard stuff. Which attorney? He named someone I'd never heard of. Not the family attorney my parents had used for 30 years. Dad always used Kellerman's office. I said mildly. Kellerman's backed up for weeks. Sandra said. This was faster. I set the document down without signing it. I'd like to have Kellerman's look at it first, just so Mom feels comfortable. The temperature in the room changed. Not dramatically. Just a degree or two. The way it does before weather shifts. Derek's voice stayed even. Claire. We're trying to keep this simple. The longer we delay, the more complicated the estate gets. I understand. I said. I just want Mom to have her attorney involved. She'd want that. Sandra's pen clicked once. Derek folded his hands on the table. They exchanged something with their eyes that lasted less than a second but said everything. You seem distracted. Sandra said, not a question. An observation sharpened into something else. I'm tired. I said. We all are. You were gone all day. Derek said. Nobody knew where you were. I told you. Errant. What kind of errands? I looked at my brother across the table. At the jaw working under the surface. At the way he was leaning forward slightly. The posture of a man who was used to being the biggest presence in a room and was recalibrating because something wasn't fitting. The kind a person runs when their father just died. I said quietly. He held my eyes for a moment, then sat back. Sandra's expression had smoothed into something carefully neutral. I excused myself to check on my mother. I walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door behind me, and stood in the hallway for a moment with my back against the wall. My mother was asleep. The house was quiet. I could hear Derek and Sandra talking below in murmurs too low to catch through the floor. I texted the number Marsh had given me. They asked me to sign a document transferring ownership. New attorney I don't recognize. I didn't sign. Her reply came in under a minute. Good. We're outside. You're doing fine. Stay calm. I went back downstairs. The evening moved in a way that felt like a play. Everyone was performing slightly differently than rehearsed. Derek kept circling back to the document in small ways. Rephrasing it. Reframing it. Offering to walk me through the language. Sandra kept refilling water glasses and asking gentle questions about my schedule. About whether I'd be staying in town long. About what the hospital had said about bereavement leave. She was mapping something. I could feel it. Just before 10. Derek set his hands flat on the table and looked at me with something that had given up pretending to be patience. I need you to trust me on this. He said. I do trust you. I said. Then sign the document. After Kellerman's looks at it, his voice dropped. Claire. I need this handled tonight. There it was. Not Dad would have wanted this. Not it's the simplest solution. I need this handled tonight. Why tonight? I asked. He opened his mouth and Sandra touched his arm. One finger. Very lightly. He stopped. We're all exhausted. Sandra said. Smooth and immediate. Let's pick this up in the morning. But it was too late. The why tonight was already in the room. I said goodnight. I went upstairs. I waited until the house was quiet. Then, I slipped out the side door and walked 2 houses down to where Marsh's car was parked without its lights on. She rolled the window down. The document they wanted you to sign, she said. Can you describe it? I described it precisely. Marsh made notes and asked 2 follow-up questions about the attorney's name on the letterhead. Then she told me something that settled into my chest like a stone. We ran preliminary toxicology on your father. She said. The hospital ran a standard panel, but we requested an expanded screen. She paused. It came back this afternoon. Elevated levels of a compound consistent with digoxin toxicity. Digoxin is a cardiac medication. In therapeutic doses, it regulates heart rhythm. In elevated doses, especially in someone not prescribed it, it induces cardiac arrest. I had administered digoxin in the ER. I knew exactly what it did. He wasn't prescribed it. I said. My voice was very flat. No. Marsh said. He wasn't. I sat with that for a moment in the dark car. My father's oatmeal. His 3-mile runs. His cardiologist who told him he had the heart of a man 15 years younger. And somewhere in the past few months, someone close enough to have access to his food or drink. Methodically introducing a compound designed to look like a natural failure. The holding company registered in Sandra's maiden name. I said. If she had pharmacy access or medical contacts, we're looking at that. Marsh said. How long? I asked. Not impatiently. Just needing to know the shape of what came next. We move on the financials first. She said. The toxicology gives us grounds to expand the investigation. But we build the financial case in parallel. It's cleaner. It's faster. And it gives us 2 tracks to prosecute on. I nodded. I need you to go back in the morning. She said. Act as if tonight didn't shift anything. If they pressure you on the document again, stall. Don't refuse outright. Just slow them down. And if they escalate, she handed me a second card. Text this number. We'll have people nearby. I went back inside. I slept badly, which was honest, and woke up before sunrise, which was habit. I made coffee before anyone else was moving and sat at my father's kitchen table in the early light with his note card in my hand. Don't let them rush you. He had known. He had known and he had been careful, and he had still run out of time. That thought made me angry in a way that was clean and useful rather than the kind that would make me sloppy. Derek came down at 7. Sandra at 7:15. My mother stayed in bed, which was a mercy. The document was on the counter. I talked to Kellerman's this morning. I said, which was not entirely true, but would be by 9. They have an opening at 2. Derek's expression did something complicated. Claire, I told them we'd be there. I set my coffee cup down. Both of us. So we can get this handled correctly, and Mom doesn't have to worry about it. Sandra looked at Derek. Derek looked at Sandra. The calculation ran between them in a silence I didn't fill. Fine, he said. His voice was very controlled. 2 o'clock. There was no 2 o'clock meeting. By 11 that morning, Detective Marsh had executed a search warrant on the firm's financial records and on the holding company's bank accounts. By noon, a second warrant had been issued covering Derek and Sandra's home, their vehicles, and Sandra's personal devices. By 1:30, both of them had been taken in for questioning. I was at the firm's office when it happened. Raymond had called me to come in for the chain of custody paperwork. And I was sitting in that same back room when Marsh's message came through. Both in custody. You're clear. I read it twice. Then I put the phone in my pocket and looked at the folder on the table between me and Raymond. The same folder my father had assembled in this same room over weeks of quiet. Methodical work he'd done alone because he didn't want to worry anyone until he was certain. He knew he was running out of time. Raymond said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the folder. He came in on a Friday, which he never did. He reorganized everything. He put the note card in. He told me, if anything happens before I finish this, Raymond, make sure Claire gets it. Not his attorney. Not his wife. You? I didn't say anything for a moment. Did he say why me? I asked. Raymond looked up. He said you were the only one who would actually read it. The trial was 4 months later. The courtroom was smaller than I expected and colder. The way institutional spaces always are. I sat behind the prosecution table in a gray blazer and watched Derek and Sandra be led in by officers and felt something I didn't expect to feel. Which was exhausted. Not triumphant. Not even particularly sad. Just the bone-deep tiredness of someone who has been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time and is finally allowed to set it down. The prosecution presented the financial case first. $231,000. Moved through 7 shell companies over 14 months. With Derek's digital fingerprints on every transaction and Sandra's name on the corporate registration documents. The firm's actual attorney testified about the forged vendor contracts. A forensic accountant testified for 90 minutes about the layering structure of the theft and how carefully it had been designed to avoid detection. Derek's defense attorney objected 11 times. The judge sustained 2 of them. Then the toxicology. The medical examiner testified that my father's digoxin levels at the time of death were consistent with a therapeutic dose administered several times over a period of weeks rather than a single exposure. Consistent, the examiner said carefully. With something added to food or drink on a recurring basis. Digoxin was tasteless. Odorless. It dissolved completely. In a man with no cardiac history. It would build until his heart simply stopped in a parking garage on a Wednesday afternoon with no prior indicators. Sandra had worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for 4 years before she married my brother. She had specific, detailed knowledge of cardiac drugs and their interactions. Her search history, retrieved from her personal devices, included queries about digoxin toxicity, thresholds dated 8 months before my father died. When that evidence appeared on the courtroom screen, Derek's attorney leaned over to whisper something, and Derek sat forward in a way that the officer beside him had to address with a hand on his shoulder. Sandra stared at the table with an expression that had stopped pretending to be anything at all. My mother sat beside me through most of it. She was smaller than she'd been before all of this. As the way people get when something knocks the foundational certainty out from under them, she held my hand during the toxicology testimony and didn't let go. I didn't tell her to. I just let her hold on. I testified on the 3rd day. I described what Raymond had told me. I described the folder and its contents. I described the note card in my father's handwriting. I described the document Derek and Sandra had tried to get me to sign the night after the funeral. And what that document would have accomplished. I described the dinner table. The way Derek had said I need this handled tonight. The way Sandra's finger had landed on his arm exactly when she needed it to. The defense tried to frame it as a grieving daughter's misinterpretation. An emotionally compromised reading of normal family stress. I looked at the defense attorney with the same composure I used in the ER when families tried to argue with a diagnosis. And I said that my profession required me to distinguish between what I wanted to be true and what the evidence indicated. And in this case, the evidence was not ambiguous. Marsh caught my eye from across the room when I stepped down. She gave me a single nod. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, long enough to be thorough. Short enough that nothing was genuinely in doubt. Derek was found guilty of wire fraud, embezzlement, and second-degree murder. Sandra was found guilty of conspiracy, financial fraud, and accessory to murder. The judge at sentencing looked at them both with the kind of controlled expression that means a person has decided not to let their feelings into their voice, and handed down sentences that left no ambiguity about how seriously the court took the premeditation involved. My mother cried in the hallway after. Not loudly, just a quiet, steady crying that was the most honest thing I'd seen from anyone in months. I stood with her until she was ready to walk out. I didn't tell her it was okay. Because it wasn't. Not entirely. But I told her that her husband had not let them win. That he'd spent his last months making sure of it. That the trail he left had been precise enough. Careful enough. Thorough enough to bring us all here. To this hallway. On this day. With the truth in the record and nowhere left to hide. Outside. The afternoon light was harder than I expected. Marsh was on the courthouse steps, talking with the lead prosecutor. She saw me come out and walked over. "How are you doing?" she asked. Honestly, I said, "I'm going to go home and sleep for about 12 hours. She almost smiled. "Your father did most of the work." "He did." I said, "I just followed the map he left." She nodded once. In the precise way of someone who doesn't waste gestures. "He chose well," she said, "leaving it to you." I didn't answer that. I just walked down the steps into the afternoon, where my mother was waiting by the car. And the city moved around us the way it always does. As if the inside of a courtroom and the inside of an ordinary afternoon exist on separate planes entirely. They don't. Though, that's the thing nobody tells you. What happens in those cold, fluorescent rooms follows you outside and it changes the shape of everything after. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the permanent, quiet way of knowing something you can't unknow. My father built his case one document at a time. He did it carefully, and he did it alone, and he ran out of time before he could finish it. But he knew me well enough to know I would pick it up. He knew me well enough to know I would read it. That was enough. In the end, that was exactly enough.